Raising Us is sponsored by Nugget, makers of the original Play Couch.
Try to expose them to lots of different beliefs and traditions. And I think that will help them understand that it's okay to believe different things. And we can respect people's beliefs, even if they're different from ours.
Parenting doesn't come with a script, but it does come with lots of questions. I'm Elise Hugh, journalist, mom, and your host for Raising Us, a podcast from A Kids Co. Every week, we break down the big, timely topics so you can have honest, meaningful conversations with your kids. Because these conversations matter, and every time we show up for them, we're not just raising thoughtful kids, we're raising us, too. You know those days when you realize it's mid-afternoon and the closest thing you've had to a vegetable is your kid's leftover broccoli? I've been there more often than I'd like to admit. So lately, I've been starting my mornings with AG1. It's this daily health drink that combines your multivitamin, pre- and probiotics, superfoods, and antioxidants into one simple green scoop. And you can add it into a smoothie to sneak in extra greens and nutrients when life gets busy, which is pretty much always. I mix it up when I'm packing lunches or getting the girls out the door, and it helps me feel like I'm starting my day ahead, not already catching up. I've noticed I feel more balanced, and it has simplified my routine, which what's not to love about simplifying our routines? AG1 has their best offer ever. If you head to drinkag1.com/raisingus, you'll get the welcome kit, a morning person hat, a bottle of vitamin D3 plus K2, an AG1 flavor sampler, and you'll get to try their new sleep supplement AGZ for free, which has been a game changer. That's drinkag1.com/raisingus for $126 in free gifts for new subscribers. On today's episode, we're talking about one big question that many parents face around the holidays. What's the deal with Santa Claus? For some kids, believing in Santa is pure magic. For others, those doubts start sneaking in. But Santa, or the Tooth Fairy, they're just one piece of a bigger puzzle. There is a whole world of stories, myths, and traditions that add wonder and meaning to this time of year. So how do we keep the magic alive while helping our kids understand what's real? To help us explore this, we're joined by Dr. Jacqueline Woolley. She studies how kids understand fantasy, reality, and belief itself. We'll talk about why these stories matter, how they shape our kids, and how to make these conversations feel natural and supportive. Dr. Jacqueline Woolley, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right, we are going to be talking about Santa, which is one of your areas of expertise today. So before we get that started, I'd love to hear about your own relationship with Santa Claus growing up.
Yeah, well, I believed in Santa Claus. My sisters did also. We grew up doing the whole Santa thing, but it's been a long time, so I don't remember very well, but I enjoyed it enough that I did it with my own kids, and both of my kids believed as well.
When was the bubble burst for you? Or when was the truth revealed, and do you remember that moment,
right,
or who revealed it?
I don't remember that moment, sadly. Yeah, I don't. I do remember when my kids discovered it, but I don't remember. It's been too long.
What happened with your kids?
Well, I was very committed to them finding out on their own, or at least feeling like they did.
Yeah.
Because I really wanted them to, I'm a scientist, and I wanted them to act as scientists and figure things out on their own. And I also felt that maybe it would feel really good to have figured it out on their own. So with both of them, I just got to a point where, and this was at different ages, but I got to a point where I felt like they were kind of ready to know. They were asking questions, and so saying certain kinds of things. And so I did the same thing with both of them. I just wrote, we had always disguised our handwriting on the Christmas presents.
Yeah.
And when we wrote from Santa. And so that year I just decided to use my own handwriting instead. And it worked both times. I mean, they were like, hey, that's Mom's handwriting. Wait, Mom, are you Santa? I knew it, that kind of thing. So
why do we, as a society, in our communities, go through the ritual of Santa or the Tooth Fairy?
Right. Good question. It's kind of an odd thing to do if you think about it, right? Because as parents, our goal is for our children to learn about the world. And, implicitly that means the real world, right? So why would we go to so much effort to teach them something about the world that isn't actually true? It's a puzzle, right? And there are lots of different answers. And I think my favorite answer is that it's fun. It's fun for parents because most parents did it when they were a kid, and it brings back happy memories for them. I think it's also fun to see your child so excited about something. And, if you think about it, most kids know that reindeer don't really fly. So I think it's kind of fun for them to imagine how that's possible. Like, how could reindeer fly? Does Santa have magic, or are they special reindeer? And I think that it's really just fun to see kids so excited about something. So that's kind of like the simple answer. But there's actually a lot of research that shows that participating in these kinds of family rituals has lots of positive benefits for kids. So, for example, like a ritual provides you with a very predictable structure. It kind of helps you know what you're supposed to do next, and it helps you know what other people are going to do. And so rituals in general are good for people. And they also allow us to, kind of bond with the other people that are engaging in the ritual. There's research that even shows that engaging in these kind of rituals has all kinds of benefits for kids. So social benefits, emotional benefits, cognitive.
Does it matter if the story behind the ritual is true?
That's a good question. There are people who study, anthropologists who study, sort of folk stories that are passed down, or folk tales that are passed down, that kind of dictate a certain way to behave. And I think kind of in a lot of cases, it doesn't really matter if people believe them. What matters is if they kind of coordinate around them. And I think with Santa, though, it's tricky because kids have all different levels of belief about Santa. It's not a yes, no, all or none kind of thing. There are lots of intermediate beliefs. And so maybe a child has some doubts about the Santa Claus myth, but maybe those doubts are kind of weak, or, they're not so sure about them. And so maybe they can kind of overlook this doubt about whether reindeer really fly and just immerse themselves in the rest of the story, and so I don't actually think you have to fully believe in the myth to get the benefit.
What do you say to the question that parents might ask about whether they're lying to their kids if they're keeping up the ruse of the tooth fairy or Santa?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And, philosophers argue about this question.
Oh, yeah, man, we're really getting existential then.
Right? It's funny that philosophers would actually, seriously spend time thinking about this. So are you lying? I guess I'm mixed about that. So kind of yes and no. I think if your child asks you point blank, is Santa Claus real? I think if you say yes, you are lying.
So let's posit that we're lying. But then there's an ethical question of like, is that lie okay? Like an acceptable lie, morally speaking.
Exactly. I think of it as maybe it's a white lie. A great example is that movie. Is it called It's a Beautiful Life? The movie about where the father and the son are in a concentration camp, and he sort of invents this game where the kid can get points for certain kinds of behaviors. And then in the end, if he gets a certain number of points, he gets to ride on a tank. And so he basically develops this whole fantasy that motivates his kid to do all the right things and to be quiet when he needs to and that sort of thing. Right. So that's maybe an extreme example, but it's a case where certainly that kind of lie is fully justified, right?
Yeah. It's world building, it's imagination, it's storytelling in a way that's
And I think, we tell white lies all the time to
Sure,
our kids, right?
sure.
We say, like, if you run out into the street, you'll get hit by a car. Well, it's not exactly true, because most of the times you can run out into the street and you'll be fine, but it's kind of, for their safety. And
My latest one is telling my kid that if she drinks Celsius, it'll stunt her growth, because the kids are really into those Celsius caffeinated, they're energy drinks, basically.
right.
But then she called me out because she's like, I want to stunt my growth. Like this. Now
Smart
you're actually
kid.
serving me. Yeah.
Smart kid.
You're serving.
I know. We tell them. My mother told me that if I made a weird face and the wind changed, then that weird face would be stuck forever. So my face would be stuck in that, right? And so I guess she didn't want me making ugly faces, because maybe that wasn't becoming. But I believed it.
Okay, just for some of the parents out there who might be fearful of maybe losing your kids' trust if they find out that you've been lying to them about the tooth fairy or about Santa Claus, what do you say to parents with that fear?
Yeah, a lot of people express that fear. I'll tell you a few things. One is that there aren't a lot of studies on this, but there are two that I know of, and both of them showed that children do sometimes, or some children experience some emotional distress when they find out Santa Claus isn't real. But most of the reactions in those studies were positive, and any negative responses were very short-lived. So your child will be fine. In one of those studies, they actually asked children how much they trusted their parents after they found out the Santa Claus wasn't real. And they basically said that they trusted their parents the same as they trusted them before they found out. So hopefully that's reassuring.
Whew. Okay, so we can rest easy even after we've been exposed.
Yes.
How do kids, this is more of a science question, how do kids determine whether something is true or real or not? And I think this is such an important thing to establish early on, considering we are coming up in this time of deep fakes and more generative AI and, governments that might be lying to us. And so how do kids sort of learn what is real and what is not?
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. These are crazy times in terms of, kids being exposed to so much wrong and fake information.
Right.
How do they figure that out? The ability to make that really basic distinction, at least I've found in my research, is present as early as, I would say, age 3 and maybe earlier. So we have recordings of children saying things like, that's not a real bowling ball. It doesn't have holes in it. It's just pretend. So they're starting to understand that there are kind of real things in the world and not real things in the world. In my research, we've looked at 3 different factors. We've looked at characteristics of the children themselves that enable them to make this distinction. So, for example, some studies have showed that kids who are more involved in fantasy and who enjoy fantasy more are actually better at making the distinction between fantasy and reality, presumably because, they do it more. So they're kind of experts in it.
Yeah.
Right. I also look at situational factors that kids might use. So imagine that you're, standing in line at the supermarket and there's the National Enquirer, for example, or something like National Geographic on the other rack, and if they both tell you about some kind of weird fish, you're going to believe it if it's in, National Geographic, but you're not going to believe it if it's in the National Enquirer.
But why?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Because the context. So one of these publications is a publication that you don't trust, and one of them is a publication that you do trust. And kids can actually pick up on that. So we did research where we introduced kids to novel beings, and some of the kids got it in a fantastical story, and some of the kids got it in a kind of a more realistic context. And the kids could actually use that context to make that distinction, which I think has a lot of implications for, internet literacy, for example.
All right. Every holiday season, I make big plans to find the perfect gift for people in my life, all my loved ones, but then I panic and just grab a gift card. This year, I'm skipping the chaos. I'm giving gifts of aura frames. And here's why. My best friends and I constantly talk about this big idea of making physical photo books of our favorite memories. We will select and print photos from the parties and concerts we went to together over the past decade or so. And then inevitably, and this happens constantly, life gets busy. And then the to-do list piles up, and 6 months later, no one has even printed any of the photos. But with an aura frame, a digital frame, you can just upload photos digitally and share them with each other whenever we find the time, straight from our phones all year long. You can't wrap togetherness, but you can frame it. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code RAISINGUS at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code RAISINGUS. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. This podcast is brought to you by Shipt. Shipt makes the holiday season more joyful by helping you save time with same-day delivery on everything you need. It could be groceries, decor, gifts, and so much more from your favorite local and national stores like Albertsons, Michael's, Target, and PetSmart. There are quality shoppers with Shipt who handle every order with special care, and they'll text you with any substitutions if they can't find your product or any special requests, so you get exactly what you need. You can find a variety of products and stores available for delivery with Shipt, so definitely consider using it. It makes gifting easy with same-day speed, nationwide coverage, personalized service from shoppers, and affordability. Members get no delivery fees on orders over $35. There's lots of ease and convenience of using Shipt for holiday shopping and for groceries during the holidays, because we still need to buy food. Text your shopper festive napkins only or no pumpkins after November 1st. Lots of really specialized instructions. They can handle it. Save even more during the holidays with Shipt's exclusive savings event, Season of Savings, happening from November 16th through December 28th. Shop tons of deals, including member-exclusive savings all season long. Terms apply. Download the app or order now at shipt.com. That's SHIPT.com. The parallel that I thought of when you talked about kids who are more discerning because of the imaginary worlds that they've spent time in, I was an international correspondent and covered people in China, for example. And they told me that I remember folks in China, sources there, saying, like, we are more discerning about propaganda. And we're more able to tell the difference between when our government is lying to us and our government is telling the truth, because we're in this propaganda all the time, like once you're exposed to it. But Americans, and this is what the sources were saying, like Americans are less discerning about it. They're more naive and more likely to take information as real or true because we've had many years of the government not lying until, that shifts, of course.
Yeah.
So
that's fascinating. That's a great parallel, between just
so it actually is helpful in some cases to actually have more experience.
Interesting. Yeah. I was going to make that point because a lot of parents are worried that if they tell their kids the Santa Claus story and then their kids find out that he's not real, that they'll never trust them again, And I could talk a lot about that, but I guess relative to what you're saying now, maybe it's not so bad if every once in a while kids are reminded that they can't trust everything everyone tells them.
What do we say to kids, though, once they have that realization, like yours did, that, oh, the handwriting matches, my parents are Santa? What do we say next?
Yeah. In my kids' case, and maybe this is just because I'm a scientist, I pointed out how scientific they were and how proud I was of them that they figured it out, that they used this information to figure it out. But, that's just because I think it's important. I think it's important for kids to think that way. But one thing that I think is pretty cool is that if your kid has younger siblings.
This was a problem in my house. Yeah.
Okay, right. So you don't want them to blow it for the little kids, right? And so you can really, make them feel like they're part of the adult world. Okay, now, and mommy and daddy know, but, so and so, Susie and Johnny don't know. And so now you can help us make the magic for them too. So, like, involve them, like, you can help us fill the stockings now, that kind of thing.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, it can empower them, and I think it probably works.
We've been talking
But
about Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that this whole thing about kids coming to you and asking, the whole process of learning about Santa is really a long, drawn out process. It's usually not kind of, them sort of fully believing and the next day fully not believing. So, by the time they come to you and ask you that question, my guess is they probably have a lot of doubts already.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily shattering their world. And also, I mean, a lot of kids, adults, my students have told me this anyway, is they hide their disbelief from their parents for years even, because they're afraid that if their parents know they don't believe, that they won't get any presents.
That's certainly been true with my youngest daughter, my now rising third grader, and the tooth fairy. She
Okay.
knows she's already been exposed about the tooth fairy
Okay.
because of her older
Okay.
sisters, but she wants the money.
Right.
So she makes this
Exactly.
big show of like, well, it's time for me to leave my tooth for the tooth fairy.
Hint, hint. I love that.
We have been talking about Santa, obviously a Christian tradition. During the holiday season, of course, there are many different people and cultures that celebrate a wide variety of different holidays, and they come with their own stories and myths and beliefs. So how do we best help our kids understand the importance of other traditions and just pluralism when it comes to these stories?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, you know, what my kids had this task. I believe when they were in middle school, they had to go experience a different cultural tradition. They had to do 3 reports on that. Um, and so, interestingly, that kind of forced me to expose myself to new other cultural traditions. So I don't remember all of the ones that we did, but we went to visit there's a Buddhist temple in our neighborhood that we had always just driven by and kind of said, oh, what's that? And we walked over there and asked if we could come inside, and they showed us all around and everything like that. But so I think, one way is just to expose your child to all of these different kinds of events. And like it can be really simple, like visiting the Buddhist temple in your neighborhood,
Yeah.
or there's big like Native American festivals in Austin that you could take your kid to. You could even bake something from another culture. Like you could bake a tres leches cake. That would be really delicious.
It's a win-win-win.
Right? I mean, if you're Christian, you can ask your Jewish friend if you could come over and for a Seder, maybe sit with them for a Seder. So you can really make it fun. Like with little kids, you could, maybe you could put costumes or outfits that people from other cultures wear in their dress up box, and you could do that obviously around the holidays, but you could really just do that any time of year, So I think it's really easy and fun to get kids to experience
just the
those kinds of
exposure. Yeah, it
events.
sounds like exposure, and it doesn't have to cost that much money. You don't have to travel around the world in
Right?
order to be
Exactly.
exposed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's lots of books and movies, but I think it's fairly easy to just maybe, um, adopt like around Christmas, for example. So when we moved down to Austin, we found out that Mexican Americans often have tamales on Christmas Eve.
Yes, the tamale making parties.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we just we don't know how to make them, but we can buy them. So we just buy them now and have them on Christmas Eve. And so that's just, like you said, a win-win too, because now we don't have to figure out what to have on Christmas Eve every year.
in Taiwanese tradition, my mother is Taiwanese. We do a lot of hot pot on Christmas.
Oh,
And so,
cool.
like a
Yeah.
big scalding, it's like Japanese, it's shabu shabu, and you just throw in a bunch of raw vegetables and meats and things like
Yeah.
that. So you could work that into your holiday
That's
repertoire as
true.
well.
It would be kind of fun. Maybe we could have we
Tamales for
could
New Year,
rotate
for
through,
Christmas Eve, and then do hot pot, and you're
right?
just exploring various
Right.
traditions from
Of
various
course, my
cultures.
son will insist that we start having sushi.
Yes,
So
yeah, I'm
it could get out of hand.
Yeah. We've been talking about kids and how much kids benefit from exploring stories and myths and legends. How can exploring stories and myths and legends benefit us as parents?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's all kinds of research with adults that shows that even just reading books can increase what's called a theory of mind, which is our ability to basically perspective take.
Yeah.
Our ability to understand that different people know different kinds of things and different kinds of people think different things. And so there's lots of research that shows that reading has those benefits in adults. But lots of other kinds of things too. So, for example, it can increase our understanding of different people's lives. You read about a detective in Chicago. What is people in Chicago like? What's the weather there like? What do detectives do? There's so much that we can learn from stories. And I also, well, aside from just reading stories for our own benefit, reading stories to our kids, there's some interesting research that shows that when you read stories with your kids, you secrete oxytocin, which is a hormone that gives you positive feelings. You've had kids, you're probably familiar with oxytocin. And, having positive feelings is a nice thing, and it can lead to, bonding and connection with your kids. So it can actually just feel good. Getting back to my earlier point that doing the whole Santa Claus thing is really fun. Reading is just fun, and it's, it can feel good, and we can learn about all kinds of other cultures and other people, what they think, what they feel. Yeah.
Speaking of fun and building on fun, how can we as parents create healthy moments of magic like these rituals around Santa for our kids?
Yeah. People like Carl Sagan and Richard Dawkins talk a lot about how you don't have to believe crazy things in order to have all of these kinds of benefits, or to experience like wonder and awe and fun and all of these good things that we've been talking about. And like they talk about how nature is magical,
Hmm.
So like think about a tadpole turning into a frog. That's pretty magical,
It's
right?
wild. Yeah. Same thing
So
with, butterflies.
exactly. We found a caterpillar on our dill weed in our garden like a few years ago, and we just emailed the neighborhood listserv, and we got one of those butterfly cage things, whatever they're called, these net things, and we watched it turn into a butterfly and released it. A lot of parents do that with their kids, but how magical is that?
Yes.
Right? So I think it doesn't have to be those magical transformations either. I mean, this might sound sort of corny, but sometimes when I sit outside in the morning after it's rained and then the sun comes up, you see little water droplets everywhere that are reflecting the sunlight, and it kind of looks like Christmas lights.
Wow. Yeah.
And so just like if there's any way you can just sort of slow down and see things like that, and maybe show your kid things like that.
In that respect, our kids can often show us a lot of wonder, just
Yes,
through what
right?
makes them feel wonder.
Yeah.
It hadn't
Exactly.
it hadn't rained in Los Angeles for maybe a year or so, a few years ago, until just one day it randomly started raining in the afternoon,
Wow.
and my kids like ran outside to try and just like feel
Yes.
the rain on their faces, and I was just like,
I
"What is
love
this?
that.
This is just
Yes.
precipitation." But
Yes, that's exactly.
it's wonder, right? It's awe, and
Yes. Yes. And they bring that magic into our lives.
yeah,
Maybe
so
we'd be
often
too
they're the ones
busy and
teaching us.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's one of the wonderful things about having kids is they do make you slow down. And when we were little, when the kids were little, we would have put sprinklers out in the front yard, and we'd just run around in the front yard. And we found out years later that our neighbors always called us the happy family because
Oh,
we were just out there. And you would never just as an adult run around in your front yard in the sprinkler in your bathing suit,
no, somebody
right?
might call the cops on you. Right.
Exactly. But you have license to do that when you have little kids,
Yeah, yeah. All right, before we let you go, Dr. Woolley, what sort of actionable takeaways or insights should parents remember when it comes to thinking about myth and magic with our kids?
I think the main thing is just to remember that it's fun, and your kid is going to be fine regardless of whether you do Santa Claus or you do some other cultural tradition. Um, but do remember that these kinds of rituals can really, increase family bonding. They can make you closer as a family. Um, and I think, you know, try to expose them to lots of different beliefs and traditions. And I think that will help them understand that it's okay to believe different things. And we can respect people's beliefs, even if they're different from ours.
Boy, that's a really timely thing to remember right now.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's doable. It's not that hard.
Dr. Jacqueline Woolley, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us.
That was really fun. Thank you so much.
A big thanks to Dr. Jacqueline Woolley for talking this through with us. Every kid's journey with belief and imagination is different. They're different among my 3 kids even. And sometimes this can be a little bumpy. And that's why these talks about magic and stories can't be one and done. When we keep the conversations candid and sincere and full of wonder, we help kids feel safe and supported as they figure out what's real to them. For more tools and resources, visit us at akidsco.com. And thank you for listening to Raising Us. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your shows. Raising Us is sponsored by Nugget.